Just build out.
No, I did.
No, that's
I
okay.
did. I did.
It's all right.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order our King County Judicial and Public Safety Committee for Thursday, March 14th. May I please have roll call?
Gumbs,
It's here.
Linder,
It was pretty good. You didn't even move your lips. Yep.
okay. I said Gumbs, Linder, Roth,
Here.
Tepe,
Happy here.
Williams,
Here.
Leonard,
Leonard here.
Molina.
Molina present. We might have a few audio issues. Okay, next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. I'll entertain a motion for consent on minutes from February 15th.
Williams will ask for unanimous consent.
Any opposition? Hearing and seeing none, minutes are approved. Public comment. I have no one signed up to speak on agenda or non-agenda items. So we will move on. Our monthly financial reports are attached. I have no one here from the Merit Commission, so we will go on to KCOM. Ms. Guthrie, good morning.
Good morning. I have a short presentation this morning. Our annual report is complete. I do have printed copies. Didn't make it quite in time to make it into the packet. I think it was posted outside of the packet, but I have printed copies for everybody. And just a short presentation here to highlight our 2023 activity. All right, thank you. Oops. While he's waiting, I will list, we do have a couple anniversaries that we are celebrating in the month of March. Our shift manager, Michelle Sandoval, celebrates 17 years with KCOM. Today, Keegan Johnson has been with KCOM 8 years. And then on the 21st, Narita Perez will be with us for 23 years. Yes, so that's a great long time to be working as a 911 telecommunicator, making a difference. We did also have a new telecommunicator start in March. Morgan started with us and she will complete training. Her training, like everybody's, is 6 to 9 months. It's a combination of hands-on skills, classroom, and then our telecommunicator in training, Saklali, continues doing all the positions for cross-training. And we anticipate her wrapping up that process soon, but she is successfully moving through the process. All right. I don't know if we're ready for the. Yeah, I see the YouTube screen. I'm just not sure if that.
Arm technology.
Yep, there we. I don't know. Is it on?
Next slide.
Yeah, we can just do next slide. Does that work? All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, so our mission up there, this is just a recap. We kind of include that every single year. The agencies that we dispatch for have not changed. We have 7 different fire agencies and 9 different police agencies, which includes a number of our county agencies such as court services, the civil process servers, the Office of Emergency Management. We can go to the next slide, please. Our organizational structure is there. So we are staffed with telecommunicators, shift managers, and then our management team, obviously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We have a little change in our organizational structure with our shift manager roles and our training manager role. But it is important with a very senior staff and staff vacancies that we have great supervision and we focus on the training program for our new telecommunicators. Next slide, please. So our staffing levels are about 3 to 4 telecommunicators per shift, and our positions are assigned by the call taker, fire dispatcher, the county police dispatcher, municipalities dispatcher, and when we have a 4th additional telecommunicator working, we've got another call taker and fire dispatch fire dispatcher. So the radio channels that we monitor, that is just a picture of what our radio screen looks like. There are different tabs included, and everything that's listed there are frequencies and talk groups that our telecommunicators are responsible for monitoring throughout their shift. So we've got a couple speakers, their headsets, and there's a lot of audio coming out all the time. Next slide, please. Other responsibilities, I won't read all those off, but just so everybody's aware, and this is listed in our reports too, that after hours, we do a lot of notifications and monitoring. We have a lot of administrative tasks that we do that are not often talked about. One of them being the entered stolen missing in the database. If the police take a report of a stolen vehicle or a missing person, they provide the necessary information for our telecommunicators to enter that into the database. So that's something else we're doing behind the scenes. In the event of a storm, we are also notifying township or highway departments or KDOT if there's trees down and something needs to be moved, or signage down, which certainly happened in February, particularly on the 27th when we had our tornado activity. Next slide, please. It's just another quick snapshot of what our radio consoles look like. A lot of monitors, a lot of keyboards. 5 of those screens are used for our computer-aided dispatch system. One of the screens, the one all the way to the right, is used for our 911 phone system. And then the large screen there is used for the radio system. That card set that you see right there to the right side, those are emergency medical dispatch protocols. So every time we receive a call that requires emergency medical dispatch instruction, you flip to the correct card and those protocols are listed. It's anything from an allergic reaction to a sick person to a chest pains, and then something more traumatic, CPR, choking, childbirth. All those more traumatic cards are listed in the red highlighted towards the bottom. Next slide, please. And here's our activity in comparison for 2022 and 2023. We met the national standard. It's 90% of your calls have to be answered within 40 seconds or less by the NENA standard, and we hit that. 99.78% of our calls were. We did have an increase in our telephone calls for 2023 with 118,909. Next slide, please. Police activity, that's about 90% of what our team handles. So for 2023, it was over 75,000 calls. Obviously, the largest in that pie is the Kane County Sheriff's Office. They bring in our largest police volume. And then the other agencies are listed there by percentage. Next slide, please. And then our fire activity. I would say years ago, it was only 5% fire activity for KaneCom, and we've now moved to 10%. We still have a mix with our fire agencies where some of them are still volunteer. You've got Big Rock that has volunteer, Caneville obviously has volunteer, and then you go to your larger agencies like Hampshire and Pingree Grove and Fox River that have multiple stations. So I anticipate fire activity growing as those communities continue to develop, and there's growth out there as well. Next slide, please. Our 5-year trends. So I was quite surprised when I was doing these statistics this year. 5 years ago, pre-COVID, our calls for service are even above that. So we saw a decrease there in the middle, 2020, 2021. We were trending back on where we used to be 2022. And then lots of activity in 2023. And I really equate that to, we only had 1,000 calls that increased, phone calls, and then you've had this large increase in calls for service. So I believe that's directly related to our officer initiated activities, such as traffic stops, them initiating the activity versus a phone call coming in for it. Next slide, please. Here's many of the updates that we did in 2023. Every year we try and do a phone system software upgrade, again, a CAD system upgrade. And then in 2022, we implemented Next Gen 911. KaneCom was the 19th in the state to implement this. We are still using Next Gen 911. It provides better location data from cell phones, and eventually, it is mandated by the state, and eventually, when the technology exists, the ability to receive text, video, and pictures. Right now, we can accept text to 911. It's an application that resides outside the phone system, but as part of this project, it would be within the phone system that we could accept all of that technology. We did convert our phone lines over to SIP. They're IP based now in an effort to reduce our very costly phone lines every month. And then one of the projects that's ongoing listed there is replacing our very pricey AT&T T1 phone lines that connect our radio infrastructure over with these ASEOD circuits, which is like switched to Ethernet on demand. And that will also be cost savings as well. I won't go through all those, but a lot of those projects continue into this year. Next slide, please. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Question?
Are there any questions or can we continue
thank
and
you.
have?
No, I do have a question. If you go back to the last slide, on the very last line, there was the communications for the LIV golf events. I did have a question about that. I know they often hire extra duty officers for this. Are we hiring extra duty communications people for this?
Yeah, for this particular event, the first year and the second year, because we actually did it both years in 2022 and 2023. We staffed that management team, actually ended up staffing that for the multiple days. In 2022, it was our operations manager, deputy director, and I for the span of the event, many hours a day. And we did equate some cost related to that we invoice live for.
Good.
And then the second year we brought in telecommunicators. We had some other staffing opportunities where we could bring telecommunicators into the command post with OEM, and we stayed on site and did training there for as well.
Thank
And
you.
they were invoiced both times.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes, yes. It sounds like we will not be doing that event this year. But should they return, we have a great plan. Our resources were not as needed in 2023 as they were in 2022, but I think that's just because it was the first year and we were figuring out what worked best. And either way, it was a great opportunity for our team, and it's always nice to work in Command One alongside OEM and coordinate what we do together. Thank you. Next slide. Well, we've talked about our space, but there's just a couple pictures to talk about one of the major projects that we did in 2023. We added an office, we added a quiet room. Our operations manager and deputy director are thrilled not to be sharing that little space anymore. So the picture that's above there is the before, and then we added the office, and there are their offices after. So they are now in their own space, and it is working well. Next slide, please. And then we did our break room. So the pictures above were the before. We had our joint space with OEM that we share the kitchen. And then our old lockers that were there with just that recliner near the window. It wasn't a private space where our employees could take a break, especially after a long shift. So they may be sitting there at the table, FaceTiming their family as people are walking through doing other things. So we felt the quiet room was very important to give them that private break space to FaceTime with their family or to decompress or to watch TV, anything that would be best for their mental health during regular shifts and long shifts. So we added new lockers, the quiet rooms there, and is used daily. Next slide, please. Now I include this activity because it is something that's a management role that we are constantly working on. So we had a lot of records requests in 2023. Most of them were subpoenas. And then we had 54 requests from our subscribing agencies. They like to review major incidents. They may need them for evidence purposes. And then our FOIAs were up this year. We had 45 of them. And then some additional audio requests from outside agencies. So this just requires a lot of staff hours when pulling these events. We do quality assurance purposes where we'll pull major events, and then we also review them extensively when they are requested from KingCom by other agencies. Next slide, please. And then just to recap. So here's what we're working on going into 2024. I talked about the expansion of looking how to reduce costs for our radio infrastructure at all of our existing tower sites. That is ongoing. I'll have more information about that soon. And we continue to explore extra space for our offices. It's great that we got this project done. Andy is still our radio administrator in need of some office space. He's kind of bursting at the seams in the yellow house and storing radio equipment in there while also officing in there. So I would love to find a solution for him. We don't have a great meeting space or training space our deputy director has added a little table into her office, and when we hire new telecommunicators, she can set up a computer there and do the classroom, but that works for only one employee, not when we hire multiple employees. So that's just something we continue to assess and pursue and think of solutions for. And then we are almost complete with a radio and infrastructure study. As we talk about the direction we want to go in and costs that we want to reduce, we had an expert really look at it and say, okay, here's what makes sense. We don't want to eliminate any redundancies. We want to make sure we're P25 compliant. We want to save costs and we want to be efficient. So that study is almost complete. And then just a couple pictures of our team. We mentioned Liv, and on the left side, there's Sarah and Chris living it up at Liv. And then in the middle, one of the many, many tours that we do, public education is a huge thing for us. We love talking about our career and how this is a great option for people if they're looking for something new. And that is more detailed within the report. And then we got a picture of our team and a couple rescue bunnies. Just a funny story there. We got a 911 call about someone who witnessed someone releasing their pet into the wild. They dropped those bunnies just in a field and took off. And our radio administrator flew out there and came back with a box with those bunnies. And our team cared for them for the day, and those bunnies are now his bunnies. So sometimes it goes beyond just the 911 call.
Keep them for comfort bunnies?
No, they visit, but for long-term care, it's best that someone take ownership of the bunnies, but they are always welcome to visit. Right there. They have been to the vet. They are doing very well. And that's all I have in relation to the annual report for 2023, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for KingCom Director? Okay, go ahead and present your resolution, please.
Well, thank you. So the one resolution I have today is proclaiming April 14th through 20th, 2024 National Public Safety Telecommunicator Week.
Okay, may I have a motion and a second to discuss and potentially approve the resolution?
Gums will move.
Ms. Gums
Williams seconds.
and Mr. Williams. Any comments or questions regarding the resolution? Hearing and seeing none, may I please have roll call?
Gums,
Yes.
Roth,
Roth, yes.
Tepe,
Zeppy, yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Molina.
Molina, yes. Okay, it passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to emergency management.
Good morning. You have my report in your packet. The only thing I wanted to note, we have our new volunteer open house coming up on Monday, April 1st at 6:30 at the multipurpose building. So public event, come out if you like. And then our new member academy starts April 10th. That's a 6-month process. So we'll talk more about that in the months to come. So I have a presentation about the tornadoes, and there we go. Yeah. No. All right, next slide, please. So this is the summary. On February 27th, there were 11 tornadoes in Northern Illinois. In Kane County, we had 4 of them listed on the right in the bright yellow. Next slide, please. So there's the map of the 4 tornadoes. The one in the upper right and lower left are circled just because they don't stand out quite as well. The one, if you count from the top, the third one down, that's the Big Rock to Batavia tornado. If you take the direction of the end of that, that was kind of heading right for where we're at here. And that's the cell that went over our complex that night after those tornadoes. It was up, didn't damage anything, but was a little bit tense in the EOC during that time. Next slide. So this is how it started. I wanted to give kind of a summary of how these things happen and what we know and how that relates to when we might advise someone to close a building or such. So there was some information in the morning about storms, but they were supposed to stay south of I-80. At 3:54, they issued a tornado watch for our area. and that kicks in, activating our EOC. Next slide. And we have a picture of the radio room. So those two people there are both volunteers. The shorter gentleman in front is manning one of the radio stations. And you can see if you look in there that there's the radar at that moment. That was actually the moment that one of the tornado warnings was issued. You can see that on the TV, just past the taller gentleman. So when we under a tornado watch, we activate our EOC. And then when tornado, at that point, we don't know if we're going to get a tornado or not. So what we're really watching for is the counties to the west of us. Next slide, please. So this is Henry County. And on the map, you can see the big arrow. It's almost out by the Iowa border. And so there was a tornado warning there at 5:25. If you look at the really bright pink and blue there in the middle, that's the cell. And then you can see that box, that's a tornado warning area. So when those things start happening, and again, this was during, if you think back, this was during a board meeting at this time. And so at that point, there's a tornado warning, it would take a good couple hours to drive there. But we're watching that and we don't know if we're under threat here yet or not. Next slide, please. So then at 5:35, we were put under a severe, this was a severe weather update, and it was said that we were now in a tornado threat area. So still at this point, there's no tornado warning, but they're telling us that we're under increased threat. Next slide. So then at this point, at 5:54, Lee and LaSalle County had a tornado warning at 5:54. So that's a little bit closer, other side of DeKalb County. And at this point, I think if you were to look back at the video of that meeting, this is around when I started getting a little nervous, and I came in and told Madam Chair that there's something to be concerned about coming. Next slide. So the meeting ended, as you know, and everybody left, and I went back to the EOC, and within, I think it was about a half an hour or so, this is the radar image at that time. And then tornado warnings started popping up in Western Kane County. So 6:45 in Western Kane, 6:54 Big Rock, Batavia, Sugar Grove, and then 7:11 Batavia, Geneva, and West Chicago. So on the left is 7 p.m. and you can see the star where we're at right here. And then on the right side you can see those two cells. That one on the bottom is the Big Rock to Batavia cell, and that's the one that came over us. The next cell up, that arrow maybe should be going a little bit higher. That one passed through Geneva, the Randall and Kesslinger area. Next slide. So here's a summary of the Hinckley to Big Rock tornado, mostly rural, and EF0. So the National Weather Service comes out the next day and they look at damage, and that's how they're able to determine if it's a tornado. If you look at damage on the ground, they can tell some of the damage is pointed one way, some is pointed the other way, and that's how they know it's a tornado versus everything's pointed in one direction. That's straight line wind. So they come out and do all that. They have a guide that tells them like say if a tree is broken, the size of the tree gives them an estimate of the wind speed, and that's how they come up with the wind speed, which brings to the EF rating. Next slide. So that's a picture a resident out in Kane County got of the Hinckley and Big Rock tornado. That was south of Hinckley at that point. That's an EF0. Next slide. So then the Elburn, and by the way, these are in order that they happened. Elburn and Campton Hills tornado was right around 7 p.m. Again, most of this was rural. There was some pretty superficial damage in the Campton Hills area. There was a stable out in that area that had a part of the roof taken off. And again, this one is an EF0, 80-mile-an-hour winds. Next slide. So now the Sugar Grove to Batavia tornado, that's the longest track and one of the more powerful ones. This is the tornado that damaged there's a nursery out on Bliss and Norris Road, did significant damage there. And then there was on CV Road, there was a historic 1882 barn that it knocked it completely down. So that was mostly rural. So that's probably where the storm was the strongest. And given that most of that was rural, we, didn't have a lot of damage. And if you look closer there, there's a bunch of little triangles along that track. That's where the National Weather Service detected damage, and they're actually color coded based on the severity. So using that data, they determined that that was an EF1 tornado at 95 miles an hour, lasted 8.2 miles on the ground. Next slide. So this is a picture from somebody's doorbell camera of the Sugar Grove tornado at 7:09. And this was a video, so we just stopped it right at the moment that lightning hit, and then you could see the tornado there. The National Weather Service advised us at 7:07 that the radar signature showed debris signature. So that's, they're picking up debris on the ground, maybe, branches and minor stuff, but they're able to pick that up on radar. Next slide. So this is the Geneva tornado, very short duration, less than a mile, EF1. And because it was in a more populated area, did more damage and some a little more severe. There was one house that had the front door that was blown inside the house, a lot of broken windows and a lot of down trees. So a little more damage, none of it major, but also was an area where people, have the means to take care of themselves and had insurance to take care of this. So that from that standpoint, everything was pretty good from there. Next slide. So the next day on Wednesday, we went out and did a windshield survey. This is where we're going out and just trying to determine where is the worst of it. We use the tornado track radar data from the Weather Service to kind of know where they think the tornadoes were. Meanwhile, they're out doing their survey at the same time. And sometimes we do it together. That day they had so much to check that they did it on their own. So these are some of the pictures. The bottom left is the nursery. And then everything else is, I believe, up in the Campton Hills area. Next slide. So the historic barn on the left is what it used to look like. And then on the right, slightly different angle is after the tornado. Next slide.
Just thinking.
And Spring Bluff Nursery, I didn't have a before picture, but took the roof off of one of their buildings and then destroyed pretty much all their greenhouses, and including plants and whatever they had going in there that at some point would have been sold this spring. Next slide. So then on Thursday, we organized and did a preliminary damage assessment. This is where our volunteers, as well as I think we had about a dozen agencies come and help us. We had about 40 people, and they're sent out in the areas of the tornado to try to find damage. And ultimately, we're looking for the worst of the damage because that's what we need to know if there's going to be any kind of federal assistance. In order to qualify for the SBA loan program, we would have to have 25 major damage, which is majors defined as more than 40% damage. So if your house is worth 100,000, your uninsured loss has to be more than 40,000. And in our county, we didn't have very much of that. I believe we had 3 or 4 of those. Next slide. So this is the data. So this is the first time we implemented a damage assessment using electronic devices and a dashboard that we worked on with GIS. So this is the first run of this. In fact, we were scheduled to do training with it last night, which we still did. But when the tornado came through, I went to our deputy director, John Menching, that was still in development. And I said, can we use this? And he said, no, it's not ready. But he got with GIS and they worked their butts off for a day and they got it ready for us. Otherwise, we would have had to do it on paper and spreadsheets. So what it does, as this is happening, these dots are popping up on the map in real time, and then the stats are changing. So you see 5 of 241 were considered major, and then the majority were either unaffected, minor, or affected. So again, we're looking for the majors. That's even though people had superficial damage, and it might be bad for them. All of the help that we might be able to get for them all is based off of how many major damage structures you have, which in this case, we're very lucky. And most of this happened in very rural areas. If you take some of these same tornadoes and put them in more populated areas and maybe more where there are more rentals and things like that, then you have much more people who might need help, might need shelter, things like that. Next slide. So I threw this in there. This is today. because it's been raining and someone might have wondered, this is what we got this morning from the Weather Service. And the moral of the story is the severe weather is staying to our south. Next slide. That's for tonight. So again, it looks like it's all south, staying south of us. So we're very happy about that. We'd like to keep it south. So that's the tornadoes from a couple of weeks ago. If there's any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for our director? Mr. Roth first?
Yes, Roth here. Scott, can we go back to the one where you did the assessment using the GIS? How, using that tool, how much more efficient is that or
It's a lot more efficient. In fact, and these numbers are a little outdated because I made this presentation went into your packet a couple of weeks ago. I think the final numbers were we checked 270 properties, and the city of Geneva did their own damage assessment, and their numbers were then added into what you see there. So that's how we got it. They checked about 30 structures.
so you're able to generate it a lot quicker?
Yes.
And with less people?
Yes, because if we did the paper sheets, we would have had to take those on paper, and then someone would have to data enter them, and we might still be typing them if we had to do that.
And this is an example of using technology for productivity and
Yeah, so
efficiency. So,
we have a handful of iPads that we use in our vehicles. We use those, and then also the volunteers' own smartphones or whatever they had could be used for this as well. It's a free app that you download called Survey 123, and then we have the survey in there, and it's great. And then now we're in the process of adding more surveys for different kinds of events.
And free is even better.
Any other questions for our director? Okay, thank you. Thank you for the walkthrough. I think it's really helpful for all of us to see kind of what, your department has done and all the volunteer work that went through. And we were all here and we all went our separate ways that night. So it was a very eventful day.
One of
for most
the
us.
issues is because when I went up and talked to Madam Chair, the first question she asked is, am I shutting the building down? And I wasn't sure. I said, can I? And it's a touchy subject, obviously, in the middle of a meeting, and you all know what was happening there. But at some point, we become worried about the safety of people in the building. And the absolute last, if we had gotten under a tornado warning for this building, then I think I would have come up and said, we have to stop and everyone needs to go downstairs. We need to get downstairs away from windows. But the decision of if it ever comes as to there's severe weather coming and we should consider stopping whatever's happening, whether that's just office, people in the building, or it's a public meeting, is a touchy subject because that decision would have to be made really long before we have a tornado warning. It's going to be probably made when the tornadoes in counties to the west of us to say this is coming and we're under threat. So we don't have that much shelter space downstairs. Probably good for the staff, but if we have a public meeting with 200 people we're at risk of how do we fit all those people in a safe way. So if we're going to close the building and tell them to go home, we have to give them enough time to get somewhere safe. So I'm working on a protocol so that we'll be able to address that if and when it ever happens again.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Ms. Gumbs, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I gotta say, that dispatch center and our office of fantastic job. It's mad chaos. It's magical to watch and they're awesome.
Thank you.
You're here.
Thank you. Good. Thank you.
You have a couple resolutions for us, so go ahead and introduce your first one.
So the first one is to recognize April as National Volunteer Appreciation Month. So this will come up for the board in April. So if you like, we can have some of them here, but we thought it was important to.
That'd be great. Okay, may I have a motion and a second to discuss and potentially approve this resolution?
Williams moved out, Roth will second.
Mr. Williams moves, Mr. Roth seconds. Any questions or comments? Okay, may I please have a roll call?
Gumbs,
Yes.
Roth, yes.
Tepe,
Yes.
Williams,
Williams, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Molina.
Paulina, yes. Okay, this passes. And Director, how many volunteer hours did we have last year?
About 11,000.
11,000 volunteer hours. That's amazing. Okay, next resolution, please.
This is just authorizing our number of procurement cards that we have. We have 3 of them and they're listed on the attachment to the resolution.
Okay, and this is a yearly resolution. May I please have a motion and a second to approve?
Roth will move the motion.
Roth moves and Mr. Leonard seconds. Any questions or comments? May I please have roll call?
Gumbs,
Yes.
Roth,
Roth, yes.
Tepe,
Pepe, yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Molina.
Molina, yes. Okay, this passes on as well. Okay, and last one.
This last one is a resolution to raise my headcount. I have currently a part-time supervisor, and this would make that position a full-time position for the balance of going forward. And I have a short PowerPoint that has some of the structure and some of the data that I use for this. So this is our current organization structure. You can see that the boxes in black are all volunteers that hold some kind of position. And then the orange boxes are volunteer functions. A lot of them are groups. And so the part-time position is the assistant director, the blue box on the left, all the way at the left. Because of the budget and because of IMRF rules, he's limited to less than 600 hours per year. So that equates to about 11 hours per week. And we find it's not enough time for him to supervise and manage 11,000 volunteer hours per year. This position was scheduled to go full-time in 2023. It was budgeted at over $70,000, and it was never filled because in the middle of the transition between the former director and myself, HR advised the acting director not to fill it, that it should wait for the new director. So that's what happened. And I think that they thought that all would be resolved much sooner, right? For several circumstances, it wasn't. When I came on board last October, it was brought to my attention. And at that point, it was too late to change the budget. It had already been dropped out of the 24 budget. So I took some time to get to know the operation, and the several factors led me to this. One being the number of volunteer hours and the amount of supervision and interaction it requires with those volunteers, as well as in emergencies like the tornadoes and some of the major snow events we had in early January. The person that holds that position was not here because he has a full-time job, and he was there. He works for another government agency, and that position comes first. So we didn't have him when we really needed him during the tornado and during those snowstorms. And that those are kind of the big factors. And then if you go to the next slide is how things would change. So what I failed to mention the previous slide was there's a training function for all the volunteers that's currently under me because we have nowhere else to put it. And that function just wouldn't fit under a part-time person like that. So making this change would switch all the volunteer functions pretty much underneath that full-time position. Next slide. So this is some of the data that I used to look at it. I compared us with what I considered comparable counties, and that was DuPage, McHenry, and Will. I have DeKalb and Kendall listed as their adjacent counties. I didn't include them as comparable because they're so much different than us. They're obviously much more smaller population and much more rural populations, and very small emergency management operations. One employee in DeKalb, which is actually the coroner, that's one of his part-time duties, and I think he has a part-time secretary, something like that. And then Kendall has one full-time director and a part-time person who has a full-time job in the sheriff's office. So they're doing a lot less. They're, all across the board, they're a lot different than us. DuPage, McHenry, and Will have very similar operations to ours, and they're especially with McHenry and Will, they're similar to our kind of population where we have a mix of rural and urban and suburban, and they have more staff and more things that you have to do when you have populations like we have compared to the sparsely populated ones. Next slide. And this is just the end of it. Our volunteers do a lot more than any of the other counties. That's why last year we did 11,000 hours. And I think the closest other county in the metro area did about 6,500 hours with more volunteers. So our volunteers are doing a lot. They're doing more functions. And after looking at this, I realized this is a need for our department. And I realize that it's unusual for this to happen in the middle of a budget year. And I recognize that, and I'm sensitive to that. The reason that I brought it forward now instead of waiting for the regular budget process was this is severe weather season and I feel like I need him and I'm missing him during these events. And so it would be a great help to us to have him now. So I understand budgets and all that stuff, but I'm here as I feel my job is to tell you when I think I need something. And I recognize you might say yes, or you might say no, but that's why I'm here. So.
Okay, may I have a motion and a second to discuss and potentially approve this resolution?
Roth will make the motion.
Mr. Roth moves.
Gums second.
Ms. Gums seconds. Questions? Mr. Roth?
Roth here. This is an example of budgeting. You know, we didn't have a director in place and so it got cut and it is a critical. I mean, we need to be, and people don't understand budgets. A lot of times they treat it like it's in stone. It needs to be flexible with the reality, and the reality is we need someone to control this number of volunteers. And it's only 2/3, 0.75 of an employee increase. So we need to be aware that sometimes we need to exception. The exceptions should not become the norm, of course. So not every department's going to always get approval, but I think in this case, it definitely warrants bringing one on, especially as Scott said, we're in the middle of tornado season.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Tepe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Regardless of the justification for this particular petition, okay, this is being funded out of reserves. We've already funded this year's budget out of reserves by adding some 10 or $15 million from reserves to fund our budget. Every time something has become before this board to be funded out of reserves, it's pretty much been approved. We're heading towards a financial disaster, okay? And we're just close to going over the brink. And at some point in time, we have to say that any kind of addition or change to the budget cannot come out of reserves. It's got to be funded some other way. Now, I'm probably going to be in the minority here. That's not uncommon for me, but it's time for us to really start looking, because if not, we're going to be over the cliff in about 2 years. So I will be voting against this, not because I don't think it's necessary, but because I don't think that we can continue to fund things out of our reserves.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Leonard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Scott, I understand that this is a much needed position. I appreciate that. I'm wondering, and maybe I didn't hear properly, but this was funded before and then taken away for the 24 budget.
Correct.
Because there was no director there.
Correct.
Okay.
I think at that time, there was concern and some of the internal issues within the department. There was concern about if that selection was made, would it be viewed as a valid hire, with favoritism and some of those issues that were going on. And also I think, and they wanted to give that decision to the new director.
And one other question too, Scott, on the additional 46,000 and change, is that an annual budgeted amount or is that for the remainder of this year?
That's for the remainder of this year. The salary range for this position is right around 65,000 is the bottom end. And then the 25% range which is typically where positions start, is 74. So the starting would be somewhere in there.
And the individual that's doing this on a part-time basis is being paid what right now?
He's being paid 25 something an hour. And that the budget for that part-time position was 15,000. So the balance of that in this fiscal year is applying to the new position. That's why it's less than the full amount. It's obviously prorated for the rest of the budget year, but then some of that money would be the unspent part-time money.
Thank you.
And then this did go through Human Resources yesterday. Our Human Resources Director did go through the grading system and the salary. So it's kind of a new procedure for us, but I think it worked really well so that we have the salary grades on here as well. Mr. Williams and then Mr. Roth again.
Scott, I know this isn't really a fair question. We're only 2 full months into the year, but do you think you have opportunities within your own budget to save some money kind of to make up for this expenditure?
I don't think that there's enough of savings to fund it completely. I think our budget is tight to begin with.
Okay.
Because there's not a whole lot of stuff in there. But I think that we can save some. I don't think we can save enough to fund it all.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Roth again?
Just a clarification. You currently don't have someone in this position you're proposing, correct?
Right.
And so this is not to exceed. So if it takes you 3 months to find someone, we won't spend the 46. It'd be less,
Right.
correct?
Yeah, I anticipated somewhere around May 1st.
Okay.
If you look through the meeting schedule and if the board heard it in April, allowing some time. So sometime beginning of May to the end of May, just depends on how long that process takes.
Thank you.
Mr. Leonard again?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, Scott, maybe I'm not understanding this properly, but Mr. Roth had asked if this was an additional new position. What happens to the part-time person that's in that position right now?
Well, if he's selected, then he would have that position. If he was not
Mhm.
selected, then he wouldn't have a job anymore. And the person that's in that position knows, and it's just part of it.
Thank you.
And just so everybody remembers, this originally, before it was OEM by itself, for the last few years, it's been under the sheriff's budget. So we really didn't have an opportunity to put a budget together, and then we were without a director. So those are my 2 cents. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so let's take a vote.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Roth,
Roth, yes.
Tepe,
Seppi, no.
Williams,
Williams, no.
Leonard,
Leonard, no.
Molina.
Molina, yes.
That is a tie
So
with
it
3
doesn't
yeses and
pass.
3 nos.
It doesn't pass on
It doesn't pass.
ties or no.
So a tie means it just doesn't pass committee.
Pass.
Mr. Shepherd's on, I think. Am I correct? Okay, so we're gonna say this does not pass committee. Okay, so we will move on to our sheriff, Sheriff Hain.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry I'm not there to see your smiling faces. Late flight home last night and lots on the docket to catch up to today. I do want to agree with Mr. Tepe that we are on a crash course for financial disaster, being part of this budget process and being the biggest general fund budget over the last 6 years. And I do support the new OEM position. But let's remember under KCSO, when we were governing them for the last 4 or 5 years until we realized that the original resolution wasn't correct and legally appropriate, we were able to be flexible and blend them into our budget, and it saved the county a heck of a lot of money and really enhanced our operations. If we want to move back in that direction, we're more than open to it at the sheriff's office. But again, we would just have to get it legally correct so we don't face any other issues going forward. I do want to say, OEM, great job, great presentation on the tornadoes. We appreciate you guys so much. Thanks to CANCOM. I mean, you look at the stats on the annual report, and they are the unsung heroes of Kane County, and we can't thank them enough for how much they work with us every day, right alongside of our deputies doing some of the most dangerous work known to man. With that, I want to recognize you should have all gotten our notification about Canine Arco, who passed away Monday. He was born in Hungary in 2014, came to the sheriff's office in 2016, served bravely for about 9 years with us. And once you retire a dog, a police service dog, and they have to sit at home, yeah, they don't last very long. So Canine Arco passed away on Monday, and Lieutenant Wogosowicz is his handler. And, just please have him and his family and your thoughts if you could. I do want to thank everybody that sent regards and came to the funeral for Deputy Chris Ruhai a couple weeks ago or a week and a half ago. It means a lot to us. Everybody reached out and wrapped around support. And so now our focus is, because we're one big family, wrapping around support of his 3 kids that are left without parents at this point. So that's the KCSO family focus. We did have an officer-involved death a week ago. It was a short pursuit where a vehicle was traveling 92 miles an hour. On Route 64, west of 47, our deputy went to initiate a traffic stop. The gentleman failed to yield to the deputy, and the pursuit was terminated. But a short time later, the vehicle lost control on a curve and slammed into a tree and burst into flames. So that is considered officer-involved death when it's initiated by, a traffic stop is initiated by a deputy, and a death is involved shortly thereafter. So that is under the investigation of the Major Crimes Task Force right now. And I just want to put on your radar one last thing. Yesterday at the admin committee, we did introduce a resolution to purchase a new Bearcat. Y'all helped us purchase a Bearcat armored vehicle in 2019. That vehicle actually saved the life of at least one deputy during the June 1st, 2020 riots. I should say civil protests in Aurora, when it took gunfire right in the front windshield. If we didn't have that armored vehicle, we would be having another deputy funeral. So what we're looking to do here is purchase a second one so we can get rid of our 3 old military surplus vehicles that we have, which are publicly unpopular and really not that useful, to be honest with you. And have 2 of these vehicles so we can properly perform our duties at the worst case scenario. Our current Bearcat is used about 3 to 4 times a month, and it is absolutely essential to public safety and the safety of my deputies. So as you see that pass through all the way to county board, I'm hoping for your support on that. And it'll be paid for out of the public safety sales tax in our vehicle fund. So Vern, don't worry about that, okay?
I voted for it yesterday.
You're the man. I appreciate it. Any questions for me, guys?
Any questions for our sheriff regarding his report? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Thank you, Sheriff Hayne.
No, thank you, guys. Take care.
Okay, next on our agenda is our coroner. Coroner Russell, I saw you online.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Oh, hello. I do apologize for not being present this morning. I had a death in the family, and I'm trying to help my niece move forward. But as always, I'm 24/7, 365, and available. But I wanted to say our report is on file. As you can see, our numbers are somewhat stable. Yeah. So also I wanted to point out, it's going to be pretty brief, meeting this morning as far as my portion. One of the things I wanted to highlight was, we recently, and we will be issuing a press release soon, we received 3 grants. One of them being from the one from Congress that I had talked about. Unfortunately, we didn't get the entire 3.1 million. But we did get 960,000, and that will be used for the purchase of equipment for the lab. The second grant that we had given to us was from the Justice Department. It was for 100,000, a little over 100,000. It was written specifically for a morgue tech, which would be a part-time position. It's written for 3 years. We can spend it over 3 years. This morgue tech position will alleviate, some of the responsibilities of our deputies so that they can, spend more time doing actual death investigation and following up and hopefully thwarting the time process it takes to, get a permanent death certificate completed. So that is a part-time position, no benefits. And it's, like I said, it's being funded through the U.S. Department of Justice. The third one was we wrote from the Health Department, and we actually received $30,000, and that was an opioid reduction type of grant. And with this grant, we're able to hire a community liaison that we're actually writing that job description right now, and obviously the grant is specific to dealing with opioid reduction. So the job of this community liaison will be to help hold events, to help thwart the opioid epidemic. And also, one of the things that is unique that we're doing that I think is very, very important is that typically, our caregivers, people who work in the industry, who are the ones that are helping, the addicts and people that are addicted to different types of things, people don't necessarily, not that they don't care about them, of course they do, but there's not really any care that's specific to them. And this grant will also be we will create events that are care for the caregivers, more or less, because we need those soldiers to be sharp and ready, because this obviously is not going anywhere, this epidemic. So like I said, we're designing, we're asking them what they would like to do, whether it's just a get together with their families, whatnot. It will all be obviously tracked the way that the grant is supposed to be. So we will provide numbers for those who show up and have them give feedback and that kind of thing. But, there really isn't a whole lot of, appropriately, there's a lot of the money goes to the people who are addicted to these types of things. But inappropriately, like I said, no money should be taken away from that. But there is no program or anything for caring for those that care for those. So that's why I thought that was important, and we wrote that grant and we were awarded that grant. So that's on the grants. We also, I'm sure many of you have been following the skull situation in Batavia, where back in 1978, a skull was found in the wall, and recently it was, a cold case was reenacted, and we did get a hit on that skull. However, we have some follow-up to do. We think we know who this person is, which is amazing. Like I said, we have to follow up with some possible descendants and ask them to submit some DNA and whatnot. But there will be a full press conference, after our follow-up, with the descendants. I project that to be around mid to late April. So that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for our coroner? Mr. Roth first.
Roth here. Mr. Russell, thank you for adding the veterans death, which we didn't used to have. Is it possible to do a breakout of what the different, causes of deaths are for the veterans?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you probably look into, how many suicides.
Suicides or overdoses. There's a lot of veterans that are suffering from PTSD, and I think we need to be aware.
Yeah,
of
I think
that.
that's something we can do.
Okay.
I will check with my team and see.
Yeah,
how we can.
as long as it's not going to cost us a lot of money to do it. I mean, but yeah, I think it
No,
is.
I don't think so. It's just a matter of manipulating the stats correctly so that the numbers are accurate.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I have Mr. Tuppy and then Mr. Leonard.
Thank you. Mr. Russell, I just wanted to get a quick update on how things are moving in relationship to the laboratory.
It's moving along. Also, the sheriff, I know he started the construction project, with, building that space out. We were waiting, obviously, for these funds to become available. And now that they are, we can continue on, and hopefully things will progress, exponentially now that we have some money.
Thank you.
And Mr. Leonard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Russell, first and foremost, congratulations on the 3 grants. I think that's wonderful. I did have one concern about the Health Department grant of $30,000. I think you had mentioned that you're going to be hiring someone, an individual, with that money. How is that going to be funded after the initial year?
After the initial year, either that person will be dissolved, that position will be dissolved, or we will try to incorporate that into our budget. This is a part-time position, no benefits. So, you know, through my special fund or whatever we can find, if we can't get that done, then we would obviously have to dissolve the position. But I think we can do a lot in the next year to make it worth our while.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
And Coroner Russell, one final request. If you can maybe, along with our sheriff and our state's attorney, give this committee an update on the forensic lab project. I know we've hired people for those positions already, but kind of just give us an overview of kind of what the next, what the last 12 months were and what the next 12 months are expected to be. I think we'd all appreciate that.
Sure, be happy to. Got to work with the sheriff because we're kind of sharing, you know, the costs, you know, right now. But you know, yeah, I'd be happy to work with them to give you an update.
Thank you. Any other questions for our coroner? Okay, thank you for being online. Okay, we will move on
Okay.
to our judiciary and courts. Chief Judge Villa, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. We have a resolution regarding, it's a 12A on your list regarding the judiciary courts and budget adjustments. We're going to remove that resolution from discussion today. And then we have a couple other things we're going to report. I think Mr. Bryan and Mr. Mathis will talk to you about those.
Okay. The other resolution that we have listed is just the annual acknowledgement of P cards for the law library and the transactional limits. So we're just asking for approval on that.
Okay, may I have a motion and a second to discuss and potentially approve this resolution?
Roth will make the motion.
Mr. Leonard and Mr. Roth. Any questions or comments? Is it annual review? May I please have roll call?
Gums,
Yes.
Roth,
Roth, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Molina.
Molina, yes. Okay, this passes on.
Okay, and then Jason would like to give an update if you could.
Good morning, Jason Mathis, Deputy Court Administrator. So we'll be bringing a resolution forth next month with some good news. We were awarded for 2024 the AOSC Technology Modernization Grant. So this will be the second grant that we've gotten since Andrew and I started working together. This one is in the amount of $272,000 and some change. And we're going to use that for updated equipment. We're going to update our jury system, which is more to come on that, but we're trying to overhaul just the juror experience in King County overall, make that better. There's also some equipment and software included for court services in the circuit clerk's office. So we'll bring that forth next month, and it's a positive thing. So we're excited about it.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for our judiciary and courts? Okay, so we will move on to our state's attorney.
Good morning. I am sorry I'm not there, but I am home with 2 out of 3 sick children, so I believe that I'm failing overall as a result of this. We do have a brief presentation for you. I do want to
I think we lost Jamie. Mr. Hunt, or?
Good morning. I believe that the presentation is part of your agenda packet, so I didn't print up copies, but it is available for you.
Yeah.
The state's attorneys will be presenting a report, their annual report that has the statistical information and the caseload details on a team-by-team basis. That's still being prepared and probably will be presented in the next month or two. This presentation, though, is on the area that I tend to focus on, which is the finances. And it's a high-level overview of what we did in FY23, which is obviously the most recent completed year. And it's still subject to a few year-end tweaks, so there may be some minor adjustments, but this is basically the information that's currently available, and you can hit the next slide, please. So we're in the process now of making some changes to the way we do the budget. Some of those are really, really good, I think. We've got some great ideas, and anything we can do to make that smoother for the county board is something that we want to be part of. So next slide, please. But when we do those changes, it's also important to understand historical financial performance of our office. And then to also consider the unfunded mandates that are imposed upon the SAO by legislative and other changes in laws that are completely out of our control. So we're going to go through a series of slides, not as colorful as the tornadoes, but still pretty interesting. So next slide, please. We are operated under both the general fund and a series of special revenue funds. Within the general fund, we have the criminal division, which is the biggest part, the collaborative diversion, previously known as the pre-arrest diversion, and the JJC council is a smaller group. We have 16 special revenue funds, 9 of which really aren't significant in terms of their budget materiality, but they are part of our operations. So next slide, please. So big picture overview here. In FY23, the financial performance for the general fund in the state's attorney's office was $1.26 million better than was in the budget. Our revenues were up slightly, combination of timing on grant awards and which were actually down somewhat, but the fines and fees and charges that we budgeted were exceeded by the actual operations. And in total, our expenses were less by $1.175 million. So next slide, please. Again, here, this is a summary of some of the funds that we have employees in, not necessarily all of the funds that the state's attorneys oversees. So next slide, please. We have made some strategic decisions where we have transferred employees out of the general fund into special revenue funds where it was applicable and appropriate to do so. As a result, that reduces the stress on the general fund. And when we get to the next slide, you'll see how that's impacted, because one of the things we've done from a financial standpoint is we're trying to reduce the number of budget adjustments we make during the course of the year, and we're qualifying those as emergency. So we haven't made a budget adjustment every time a person has shifted from one fund to another. So it does create some variances. Next slide, please. You can see here then, this is the our payroll budget performance, FY23, broken out by our general ledger codes, the funds that are involved. The total there that was budgeted for the year was a little over 11 million. We spent a little under $11 million. In the next column over has the over under budget. And you can see there are 3 that are highlighted in red where we actually show an excess expenditure in terms of actual payroll versus the budget. That's where we did make some transfers from those funds into the general fund. So the general fund being $343,000 better than budget would be offset somewhat by those others that would ordinarily have been budgeted that way. We also still have one of the year-end adjustments that will be coming forward in the next several weeks, I'm sure, is $125,000 of funds that had been placed in contingency. Those will be released into our budget. That won't change the dollars we spent, but it will change the comparative number. So we'll actually be about almost $250,000 better in terms of the final budget versus what we spent. Next slide, please. Pictures are easier sometimes to understand. We've got in all of our expenses in every office and department and sub-department, salaries and benefits are the largest part. And these slides, I won't take a lot of time, but they're pretty indicative of the way that we've compared. The blue columns are the budget. The green column is the actual. Next slide, please. So in addition to the general fund, which obviously is the primary focus of this committee and the county board as a whole, we operate 7 special revenue funds that are material in nature. Those funds do not draw from the property tax levy. So, and we made one adjustment and combined the drug prosecution and the drug asset forfeiture funds in order to comply with the grant reporting requirements for that particular fund. Next slide, please. So with the exception of the civil division is part of the insurance liability fund. They don't have any revenues of their own, so they're like a quasi general fund operation. But the other special revenue funds are self-balancing. We create cash or fund balances within those that are the operations of those funds is restricted specifically. And so when we do better than budget, it builds up the balance a little bit. If we do worse than the budget, it draws down from the existing balance. But in no case do any of these funds draw from the property tax. So next slide, please. Civil division, which saved $246,000 in FY23 compared to the budget. Temporary vacancies accounted for about 40,000. The insurance coverage costs, because those vary based upon the actual as compared to the budget, which tends to budget at the highest level of coverage. We saved another $80,000. And we didn't incur as much in the way of outside legal fees as we had expected. That varies from year to year and is very hard to predict and control, but it did save us $107,000. So next slide, please. Again, another just a categorical comparison, budget versus actual for the civil division. Next slide, please. Title IV, that's our child support division. We operated, and this is, I'm calling this an operational budget variance. This is the actual expenses and revenues of that fund, excluding any utilization of the fund balance. So this is actually what we spent and what we expended during the course of the year. So our grant revenues were down a little bit, essentially due to some timing differences, but the investment income that was based on the funds available there actually exceeded the amount we were down there. So that was offset. And we did not incur nearly as many expenses in the way of contractual services and trial costs in this division. So next slide, please. Again, here's the categorical breakdown. It's pretty much even in terms of salaries and benefits. Contractual is different. Commodities is too small for me to see. Next slide, please. This is the other fund that was combined. The drug prosecution and drug asset forfeiture funds were merged. And this is one, if you go back, if you remember the couple of slides ago where we did the payroll summary and there was a red overage in the payroll. That's, well, we don't have to go back there. I'm relying on their memory. But we did transfer one state's attorney from the general fund into the drug prosecution. So the combination of his salaries and fringe costs was $105,000. We did get a little bit more in the way of forfeitures and fines. So that offset most of it, but we had a $48,000 negative operational variance. Again, none of that comes out of the general fund. Next slide, please. Same sort of categorical display. And you can see on this, in this case, the salaries and benefits actual exceeded budget. Next slide, please. Victim coordinator is another area where we moved 2 administrative assistants into the victim coordinator services to become advocates. As a result, our salaries went up a little bit, and the related fringe costs created a $92,000. Those are 2 full-time positions, hourly rated. Next slide, please. Again, you can see the difference here where we did the transfer. Next slide. Domestic violence resulted in a $36,000 positive variance. Basically, our consulting services were a little bit less than we expected, and we didn't spend as much in training. Next slide. Same breakdown. Next slide, please. CAC, that's the Child Advocacy Center, which is obviously a huge part of what we do. They are substantially grant funded. We have 4 external grants that vary from year to year: DCFS, ICEJA, and VCBA and VOCA grants. Our grant revenues were down a little bit due to timing. Those grant revenues are tied to actual expenses. They're reimbursement-based grants as opposed to forward-funded grants. And when our expenses are down, the revenues are correspondingly down. The fees though, that we charge because the CAC is a busy place, we're up $180,000 and the interest income was $27,000 better. We did move one state's attorney from the general fund into the CAC, and so the salaries are over budget there. And the next slide is going to show that display. If you could hit one more slide for me, please. Records automation is one employee partially funded from the general fund, partially funded from the special fees that are generated from the circuit clerk's office for some of these things. We largely saved the money by deferring the purchase of some computer hardware. So we may come back next year for something to replace that, but for FY23, we were $18,000 better than budget. Next slide is going to be again, all right, one more, please. One of the things that I wanted to clarify though, because there have been some comments that have been made during the discussion of our new budget plans. State's attorney in FY21, FY22, FY23, and we have no plans in FY24 to pay lump sum distributions. There's been comments made about that. That's a practice that has been eliminated. There's also been comments about vacant positions, and we do have vacant positions. The nature of our operation involves a lot of turnover. Since we submitted the budget, we've already had 4 ASAs that have resigned and one as recently as last week. So at this very moment, we have 11 vacancies in the general fund, 4 for assistant state's attorneys, 3 for staff. So we do manage, we do aggressively and actively pursue finding people to fill these positions, because if for no other reason, the work has to be done, and it helps everybody's workload. So we utilize human resources, we use professional organizations to help recruit candidates, and we will continue to do so. We also have 3 vacancies that are in the CAC. Those are grant-funded positions, and unless and until we fill those positions, we don't get the reimbursement on the CAC grant. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood the way we are doing business there, the way we plan to do business, and we are being cooperative with the county board and in particular this committee. The other special revenue funds that we mentioned collectively were only $3,000 over budget. So it's wasn't worth making more slides for. At this point, one more slide advance there, please. So we're in the process. I mentioned this about the 2023 annual report's not ready, but there were some statistics that I could glean. So another new slide, please. Murder cases in 2023 there were 14, which it represented a 40% increase over the prior year. Murder cases obviously are some of the most difficult and time-consuming cases to prosecute. We had 2,700 new felony filings, a 15% increase over the previous year, and it's represented the highest total in the past 10 years. We had 435 new felony drug cases. Next slide, please. Special victims cases were up 39% in sexual assault and abuse cases, child pornography cases, 50%. And that's been a real focus of our office, to try to aggressively investigate and pursue and prosecute some of the most vile offenders that we run into. The state's attorney works with 34 police agencies in Kane County, and the felony charges that were screened by our office rose by 40% during FY22, it increased 843 individual cases. Next slide, please. So this is where I was going to pass this along to Jamie or John or somebody that knows more about this.
I'm here, Terry.
Thank you very much.
So I think we all understand that we've had several unfunded mandates, and the biggest one that we've seen obviously was what happened with the Safety Act, and included within the Safety Act was, of course, the Pretrial Fairness Act. Yesterday, I spent the day down in Springfield lobbying on behalf of judicial and public safety to see if we could get some state funding for FY25 to try to be proactive in regards to what I think we all fear is going to happen, because as I believe Board Member Tepe said earlier, we have been getting money from reserves without getting any revenue from somewhere else to anticipate what is going to happen. I'm going to let you know that we are seeing crime as an uptick still. That is not something that's lessening. We're not able to lessen the amount of prosecutors that we have, lessen the amount of investigators, lessen the amount of support staff. I am pretty sure my other judicial and public safety committee members would tell you the same as well, that they cannot do with less clerks or less deputies or less anybody in their divisions. And so as the state's attorney, I am trying to make sure that we are prepared for FY25, because I fear that somebody is going to come back and say that we have a deficit, and as such, we're going to have to start cutting staff. For public safety purposes, I do not believe that that's possible, given the amount of people that we have now, the fact that crime continues to go up, and the fact that we know that there's still going to be further unfunded mandates. I can forward to this committee the sheet that I sent to our Kane County legislators, of whom I met with the majority of them yesterday. There was a couple people I was not able to find. I did make a $3 million ask out of the state budget to go to judicial and public safety, so that we have that cushion necessary so that public safety is not hampered as a result of any budget season that we may have. You've heard plenty of reports about what's happening with the Pretrial Fairness Act and the fact that we have a courtroom that's operating 7 days a week and is operating full time. The amount of staffing that the state's attorney's office has had to increase is a minimum of 15 people, and that goes through attorneys, investigators, advocates, and support staff. I know that the circuit clerk's office has seen a reduction in their revenue as a result of all of this, which has caused a burden on this county. We know that the sheriff's department has had to incur overtime just to have staffing on the weekends and then holidays. And we know the judiciary is seeing expenses coming through with an hugely increased amount of transcripts that are having to be provided from these pretrial fairness acts, because now they have a mandatory right of appeal if they choose to do so. So the reason why we're presenting all of this early on is to let you know that we are being very proactive, but we are also being very fiscally responsible, and we are abiding by the rules of this county in terms of what you all set forth in terms of financial policies. So we are here and available for questions if you have any of them before I get to the resolution.
Please advance the slide.
Oh, no. Any questions? Mr. Roth?
Yes, Roth here. I actually have 3 questions. One on when Terry, on the slide you're showing payroll and, out of general fund versus special, it looked like 33% we're getting from special funds. If that goes down, does that mean we have to use more general funds and vice versa? If we get more special funding revenue?
Any increase in special revenue fund personnel would probably come from grants.
Right.
For example, we got an increase in our DCFS grant in the fall, and that provided the 3 new positions that are currently vacant,
right,
but in the process of being filled. It is not always practical or allowable to simply transfer employees from one fund to another, because those
and I understand there's requirements and stuff, but I guess the question is, if we can increase our special revenue fund revenue, it puts less pressure on our general fund as a general rule.
Yes, but the special revenue funds are also very limited in the way they can
And I
increase
understand
that revenue.
Right. There's restrictions, and I understand that.
Well, there are restrictions, but primarily the general revenue or the special revenue funds are funded by grants and fees for services. So there are limited opportunities to substantially increase that.
And related to that, the comment, the unfunded mandates, that we're being reduced on some of our fees, so we're getting a penalty from the state because, they're passing laws without providing funding or
I think it was
unfunded
maybe
mandates, right?
3 chief judges ago, they said, justice is not cheap.
Okay. And then the next question, you mentioned in the state's attorney, you have 11 vacancies. How does that compare to last year? Because, at one point I thought I heard last year we were at 20% turnover.
We're much better in terms of turnover because of the increase in salaries. And now we're
Right.
very
Okay.
competitive.
Can we do a number, percentage? What, if it was 20% last year, what are we running at this year?
We can do that and we can present it at the next.
Okay. I mean, because it shows that at least we're making progress in the direction we need to make, and we need to continue. And then the last one, Jamie, you had mentioned you're requiring 16 individuals because of the Pretrial Fairness Act. Before that went in place, how many employees were assigned to the bail, I guess the bail process?
So I don't want to say that those people are all for the bail process because the safety
Right.
portion of it encompassed more because we have new technology requirements. We have new requirements that we had to do through FOIA, things like that. Before we would have attorneys who worked in the office who just basically volunteered for the bond call process. We would pay them money if they were there on the weekends, but otherwise during the week, we did it by week. People were told this is your assignment. Now we need to hire 3 attorneys to staff that, 1 advocate and 1 support staff person.
Right. And that's part of the unfunded mandate, which we need to start holding our state legislators accountable, I think. Because to me, it's a hidden tax that the county's having to pick up.
Part of one of my arguments yesterday.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Could you please go back 1 slide? No. Next one, 30, there, no. 1 more slide advance. You're going, there we are. This was the winning selection from 4 choices that we made, so. it was the
Before
least-
Jamie went downstate
it was the
or
least
after?
graphic of our
No comment.
State's Attorney Masser, if you can forward that information that you were passing out to the legislators yesterday. I think it's really important that we all understand that regardless of our budget pressures, what our judiciary does, we have to fund. We need these people in those positions. So when we're looking at the budget process, we have to be very careful at what we're choosing to fund and what we don't have a choice to fund. So just a heads up, the Safety Act has created a large unfunded mandate for our county. And I think we need to make sure we're capturing that and that we understand that we have to pay it regardless. We don't really have a choice right now. Mr. Tepe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate this report and this whole effort, plus being proactive. And I want to point out something that one of the things you had in your report is that pornography convictions or charges had increased 50%. Okay, and I think perhaps part of that is due to last year we authorized additional people. I believe it was in the investigative side of that. And those are the kinds of things that I think Kane County needs. So what I would really hope is we're not at loggerheads in this. We're in this together. So this whole situation that we're going to be facing in the next year or two, we need to work together to do this and help solve it. But the last thing I would hope we would do would be say we have to cut these kinds of costs, which would really, in my opinion, impact the safety of the county. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to have to face. So I really appreciate this report. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for our state's attorney? Okay, thank you both for being here. We will move on to our public defender. Oh, you have a resolution.
So this is in admin yesterday. This is the purchase of 3 vehicles. 2 of those are to replace 2 of the vehicles that we have that are older in nature. And 1 is a new vehicle that is actually going to one of the people in our child exploitation unit who is doing the child pornography cases. And so we did follow all of the necessary procedures to have these evaluated by the Department of Transportation to see whether or not they made the recommendation that they be replaced. In addition to that, these are budgeted.
Okay, may I have a motion and a second to discuss and potentially approve this resolution?
Roth will
Happy-
make the motion.
Deputy second.
Roth and Mr. Tepe seconds. Any comments or questions? I had one question. What do we do with the older vehicles? Are we selling those? And then does that money go back into the automobile, fund?
There is a policy for the resale of retired vehicles to go through purchasing, and we'll follow the protocol there. But I believe it ends up back in the automotive replacement fund eventually after they've done all their magic.
So it does come back into the same fund to keep,
No,
no, it goes to the general? Where does the money, my question is, where does it go after we?
it doesn't.
It doesn't go
I
to,
only know it doesn't come back to us.
okay. Okay.
Barry, how can you let that happen?
So I'll follow up on that. I think it's important to know what, because these have high resale value. I mean, if you looked at the scoring, they're not terrible. Their mileage was very low. So we should be able to get some money back from those vehicles.
Well, yeah, so to that point, these were evaluated last May, so they're another model year, and even at that time, they were 13 and 14 years old. So I don't think we're going to tip the balance of the budget based.
Oh,
on
I don't think so either. But every penny counts. Okay, may I have a roll call, please?
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Roth,
Roth, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Molina.
Molina, yes. Okay, this passes on to finance. Okay, I think we're done with our state's attorney for now.
Thank
We
you.
will move on to our public defender.
Good morning. My reports are on file. Just in relation to the Safety Act, one of the, I know we've talked about it a little bit this morning, but one of the things we're starting to see is that we are getting a lot of opinions back from the appellate court, which have been helpful for us, both sides, state and defense, in refining the arguments that we are making, its direction from the appellate court. So our arguments are more succinct and makes it a little bit more efficient in the courtroom. At the end of this month, we are having a training in our office from the Office of the Appellate Defender, where they're going to help us with our appeals, because something new with the Safety Act was that we have to, the public defenders, when we are appealing the detention hearings or the conditions hearings, we have to file a notice of appeal. We are not appellate writers, and we're not writing appellate briefs, but there is a lot of information that we have to include in these notices of appeal. And so we're getting a training the end of this month from the Office of the Appellate Defender to kind of help us with that, so that those will look better when they go up to the appellate court. So other than that, if you have any questions on our reports, I could move on to the resolution.
Any questions on the reports? Okay, yeah, go ahead and introduce the resolution.
So this is the resolution to the annual review of our procurement cards.
Okay, may I have a motion and a second to discuss and potentially approve this resolution?
Tepe will move.
Mr. Tepe moves. Mr. Roth seconds. Any questions or comments? Okay, may I please have roll call?
Gums, Roth,
Roth, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Leonard, Molina.
Molina, yes. Okay, and this passes on. Okay, no other questions or comments for our public defender, so we'll move on to our court administrator.
Court services.
Court services, sorry.
Good morning. Thank you. I don't have any resolutions in front of you today, but I do want to give you a couple of updates. I will bring the resolution next month for the P cards. I've had some discussions with, or emails going back and forth with purchasing about the P cards, and I want to see some changes before I bring it forward. So that'll be next month. Good news, as you all know, we did get a federal grant to help give treatment for our opioid users as in our treatment court participants. And we were extended over 100,000. I think it's just under 140,000 was able to be rolled over into this fiscal year, and then that will conclude the grant. And I bring this up because at the same time, I did meet with the ad hoc opioid committee here in the county, and we went through the rules, or I went through the rules and saw that treatment courts are eligible for those funds as well. My obligation, I feel, is to expend the federal funds first, because the ad hoc opioid money obviously stays here within that committee, and then it's available for use but I want to expend the federal grant dollars first. There's a timeline on that. I also want to let you know, the county did approve, speaking of the sex offense kind of investigations and prosecutions unit, those are up. The prosecutions on those kinds of cases are up. And so the county authorized me to hire 2 probation officers. You can see on my monthly stats to you, we did hire 4 probation officers. 2 of those were those sex offender officers. I've now, because we've hired those people, have begun the application process to the state, to the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts, to get those positions reimbursed by the state. So I'm hopeful that that will happen. And when that happens, I will bring forward a resolution on that. But in the meantime, I'm just wearing my good bureaucrat hat and continuing on with the department. So my reports are on file. And if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer those.
Any questions for Ms. Ost? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and we will move on to our circuit clerk. Ms. Barrero, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. My report is on file, so if anybody has any questions with that, I really don't have too much to talk about other than we will bring our P cards resolution also next month. And we were ecstatic to be part of that grant because that actually makes us part of our 5th grant for the circuit clerk's office in the past 2 years almost. So if we, and that is towards our microfilming and our technology scanning. And if we complete all that huge project that we have all boxed up and ready to go, we will actually be the first in the state of Illinois to go completely paperless. So we are very ecstatic. I do want to bring your attention, this microphone's really loud, or it might be me. Kudos, Roger. This is like, there's a lot of statistics that we will need to be reporting to the state of Illinois. And we're doing a lot of changes with codes and that and what clerks need to enter per offense or per charge, I should say. So we might, right now, currently, we still have, I believe, 2 Safety Act positions that we did not hire yet. And we're looking into if we still need those 2 positions because they were put in that contingency fund to help us with coding and do training and reporting. We might end up back with 2 deputy clerks in the bond call room. We brought that back to 1 because it is overtime, et cetera. But now with the new statistics that we are required, that is supposed to start April 1st, we might put another one back in there. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that overtime might exceed a little bit, but we had that already budgeted. So we're watching the numbers on that. And then of course that position is already budgeted. So that should be okay. Other than that, we did give 2 ARPA grant positions back to ARPA since it was 2 years in the making and staff was already doing the work that we had asked for. So we just kept it in office and returned those funds or didn't accept those funds.
Thanks.
So that's all I have. If anybody has any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Roth?
This is a clarification. You said microfiche. Did you mean
A microfilm.
microfilm versus laserfish?
Yes.
Okay. All right, just
Can tell how old I am.
yeah, I know. And then once we're up, you're saying you're about 100%. Will the operational costs come down because you're not having to do catch up on, scanning everything?
No, actually it won't.
Okay.
It'll still remain the same, if not go up. The only thing is it's easier to find the documents
Right.
and they'll be more
So there'll
clear
be some
and more accessible.
efficiencies there.
Yes, it makes it more efficient.
Okay.
But no, I do not see our head count going down. In fact, I worry that it'll go up with the appeals that public defender just discussed. We have those that have been, at one point, we were the highest in the state. I believe, I think Will County passed us on appeals now. And with all the statistics that the AOIC is requesting, which we knew was going to happen. They talked about this through the Safety Act and everything they were looking for and looking at. So we knew it was going to happen. It was just a matter of when.
So for that, that's additional requirements as part of the Safety Act that we have to do.
Correct. In a roundabout way, yes.
So in a
State
way
of-
that,
It's additional requirements the state.
And
has
of course, we did
requested.
not get any additional funding to pay for that, correct?
No, we did not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for our circle clerk? Chief Judge Villa, did you want to say something too?
I thought maybe I'd just help everyone understand a little bit about the Pretrial Fairness Act and its impact across the state. As you can see, it's affecting 3 of the members here that operate in the judicial system. This is not unique to us. It is really well managed here in Kane County. We should all be proud of the way our prior chief judge, the state's attorney, and the public defender have managed this as well as the clerk's office in handling the volume that has come out as a result of the Pretrial Fairness Act. That volume relates to appeals. The ever-present genius of legislators who pass laws without asking people how it's actually going to happen can be demonstrated by the number of appeals that come out of these cases. This is a creature of statutory construction. It is not a constitutional issue of appeal. However, every single person who now goes to bond call automatically has a right to appeal every condition that is placed upon them. That doesn't mean people we've had that were detained or people who are kept in custody. It means even people who have conditions placed on them. And why wouldn't they file that appeal? Right? I mean, so everybody has filed an appeal. I go to attend the Conference of Chief Judges every month. I'll be there this Friday. I'm sure we'll get updated numbers. Last month, there was a lot of discussion from Chief Justice Tice of the Illinois Supreme Court, who meets with us, 24 chief judges that run the trial courts, to advise us of the number of appeals that have been filed. They're astronomical. There is a move amongst some of the chiefs to moderate the way in which some of these appeals are happening, change possibly some of the legislative rules or language so that certain methods for appeals can be more streamlined. There's a discussion amongst the chief judges of the Supreme Court justices about whether or not to create a committee of appellate court justices who would only hear appeals. If any of you follow the opinions that come out of the Second District Court of Appeals, or if you happen to be waiting for a case or something that is not criminal related, keep waiting because they're hamstrung by the number of criminal appeals that they have to handle directly related to these issues. So everyone around the state is working on to try to eliminate some of this effort that we all have to put into, but I don't think it's going to go away immediately. And I think that to the extent that each of these departments is going to request assistance and additional people, I think you should consider that as something that we really need to do. We're going to need to continue to have your support for that. So I just want to give you an overview that it's not unique to us. It's not mismanagement on our part. None of the departments that are doing this are looking for something that they don't need. And we're going to try to do our best on the judiciary side, away from the county and amongst ourselves, to try to eliminate some of this burden on county boards and individual departments everywhere in the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Villa. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we will move on to on our agenda to old business. I did have an update. We are still working on the ordinances for the noise and the discharge of firearms. We do have a new version, new amendments. So I'm hoping that I'll come in front of our committee next month to discuss. Any new business for the committee at this point? Okay, may I have a motion and a second to place reports on file?
Please, 50 seconds.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, reports are placed on file. We have no need for executive session and no public comment. May I have a motion and a second to adjourn?
Roth will move.
Have Mr. Roth and Mr. Tepe. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, thank you, everybody. We'll see you next month.